Hello, and welcome to Pebblebrook Village. I am Peony, and this is the week ahead reading for what day? April 13th. Recording this on Saturday, so I have lose track of the dates. But yeah, the week ahead reading for April the 13th. I also wanted to quickly, before I get into it, I am going to be launching both an Instagram and Threads page that is specifically Pebblebrook Village. It'll be moving away from using my personal one for this, so it can kind of separate those aspects of my life a little bit more, and focus my personal one on gaming that I don't talk about as much, and my advocacy work and stuff like that. So yeah, that, and I'm going to start making mixes around transits, once a month thing. I think I got burned out a couple years ago when I was doing this, and I was trying to do it weekly on my Instagram. So I think once a month, just kind of, it'll be songs, usually trying to stick to a tight 45-minute, very intentional mix of the energy vibes of that month. So for people that don't use streaming and would still like to listen to these, I will be coming up with other ways, possibly burning them to CDs at some point for people that are interested, then also just zipping the MP3s in a folder, and then you can listen to them on your personal player without having to stream. So if anyone's interested in that, once I start doing that, just let me know. I'll have a reminder on the post of access to that. And then lastly, I will also be looking at starting a Discord for this, for anybody that is interested in being part of the Pebblebrook Village community. I don't know when that'll be launching. That's not like a priority or anything, but just something that is on my mind, and very much something that I do plan on doing. All right, that is that. So we will go into the week ahead tarot forecast for April 13th, starting on Monday, April the 13th. So the energy for the week, we have the Knight of Swords, which I think is specifically with Mercury and what it's doing this week. It's moving out of Pisces finally and into Aries, so that sets a kind of precedent for that sort of vibe of the Knight of Swords. It is the second in the court cards. It comes after the page, but it's still not the king and queen. It is a sort of right hand of the king and queen. It is somebody that has gone through the pages journey and is in a higher position at this point. With swords being representative of air, being representative of the mind, in this case I'd even say that the Knight of Swords acts as a sort of messenger in this case. It's the energy of someone that thinks they know better than they do. Somebody that speaks before they think, somebody that lets the intrusive thought just fly out of their mouth without stopping, pausing, and thinking if they should have said that first. It is very much someone that even best intentioned can just impulsively burst into a situation. Very kind of, I'm getting Kool-Aid Man bursting through the wall vibe. He is bringing, I guess in the context of selling kids, high sugar fruit drink, he's bringing joy, right? Kind of almost a Jupiter approach to it. But that is kind of the Knight of Swords. It's bursting into something without thinking it through. The horse on the card is in motion, and it's propelling them forward. So I think this week is going to see some tough conversations, maybe even not just conversations, but events that make them want to react, and this is just a sign to just not be too reactionary, to consider the news you're hearing, to consider that it might be misinformation, even before reacting and falling into that rabbit hole of impulse. So I think acting as a messenger to the king of sorts, the king and queen, we could see, communications from the press, from Carolyn Levitt, who is basically the mouthpiece of the administration in the United States. Other people that communicate for a person who considers himself to be a king. It could be stuff that Hegseth or Rubio or even by extension Netanyahu, like any of these leaders, could be saying stuff that is very fiery, saying things and reacting in ways that could impact the supply chain, could impact communication. Iran could react in a way that disrupts communication. I don't know, if what's going to happen on Sunday going into Monday, because I'm not there yet. But something could even be said at that point. There's this. I think too with communication, when we have Neptune and Mars meeting on Monday, I'm already seeing a lot of this very energy that in communication and people saying things that is people carrying a torch for the patriarchy, thinking that they're being an ally, thinking that they are, on the right side of things, and saying things like, I listen to all women, but, and you add but to that statement, then you do not listen to all women, and I don't trust anything that follows after you say that. You have completely convinced me that what you're about to say is in bad faith and disingenuine. So a lot of that energy throughout the week for sure, and I think that, with what Chiron and the sun shining a light on it with the Kazemi on Thursday, I think that is going to be a message about the grief that we're feeling, and are we redirecting it into the right energies as we go through the week. And Mercury moving into Aries out of Pisces is, and like I said, that is the Knight of Swords. That is, Mercury is going to go from this very dreamy, way of communicating, being very symbolic with it and not as direct, and it coming, still kind of just barely out of its post retrograde shadow, is just going to be stumbling into Aries, ready to throw hands, and a lot of that we might see being around disillusionment of leaders with the Neptune conjunction, misguided faith, very dogmatic ways, more hunkering down on, holy war type communication, or stuff that even ties back to when Mercury first went into retrograde. First, we even went into Pisces, because it's been, just a long period there because of the retrograde. So we could see, be seeing kind of repetitions or follow through with some stuff that's been communicated earlier. And like I said, on the personal level, just within your interpersonal lives, your personal relationships, don't, especially I think with Mercury too, for the personal thing, like don't just impulsively sign a contract, impulsively buy something. Don't just impulsively say that first thought that comes to your mind. You know, consider things through before you move ahead. The knight is, the knight has gone through the page's journey, but on the way to queen then king. But it's not a straight line. It's a circle, because just because we completed one journey from page to king doesn't mean that there's not another one that's going on in tandem, taking longer for us to complete, or that happens after. Like, we should never be stagnant in that king. Like, we might get that enlightenment, we might get to that point for a thing that we've poured ourselves into, but that does not mean that you singly know everything and that you're not still a page or becoming a page in something else. So the page is still in the knight, the page is still in the queen, the king, etc. So remember that not everybody is where you are at, and think before just shooting off, and also just make sure that we're getting rest and taking care of ourselves too, because there could be some tough conversations that people might need to have. I'm just thinking of like where Aries, it could be in some people's charts. Like, I'm a Libra rising, so it's in my seventh house of relationships. Other Libra risings could be seeing a lot of like combustion in, with known enemies, with spouses, partners, people you do business with, neighbors, any type of like really interpersonal, where there is kind of a contract, and that there's this precedent of coexisting with one another. And that does include enemies. So, especially with this Aries energy, that's just one example. And okay, so why is this here? Seven of Wands. This is the third decan of Leo, which is where the eclipse was in the North Node back in February. This is a reminder to advocate for yourself. This is a reminder to stand your ground. Don't roll over. Advocate for those that don't have the privilege to do so. But it starts with advocating for yourself. If you can't set boundaries for yourself and stand your own ground and know what your morals are, you can't do it for other people. So it always starts with the self. And there's going to be, I think, a lot of, like I said, a very Aries charged, Mars ruled type of communication this week. So new things initiating, things of like fire, battle, even within your personal life, just battle of the mind, battle of words, and know when to stand your ground, and when maybe you are the one that needs to reflect on, like, why are you reacting this way. And the star Regulus is also in this decan. So I think that just what that represents. Again, there's this kind of like rulership thing with like the communication that serves the king, with the Knight of Swords, the Seven of Wands being in the third decan of Leo, and where Regulus is. So even like with authority figures in your life, just know to stand your ground, and to be sure of your boundaries, and when to, and when, even just because if someone's being disingenuous, when to walk away from the conversation. If it's not a conversation, it's just more of a argument that is just going in circles, it's not worth your energy. At least one person in that argument is not ready to reflect and accept, any form of growth, possibly both people. So it's just, you know, walk away from those types of situations and protect your peace. All right. And how do we deal with this? Six of Wands. So we're still in Leo, this second decan of Leo. Speaking is hard. The second decan of Leo. And this is hard work and leadership. And what does success mean to you? So I think like taking in and disseminating the information that's coming in this week, the events that might unfold on the world stage, or in your own house, in your own body, the feelings that could start flowing. We need to set our boundaries, and we need to advocate for ourselves, because that's how we lead. That is how we figure out like what are we doing? Why are we reacting this way? What is our end goal in this conversation? Do we have one? What is our goal, in life? What is our goal for this week? Like, what is it that we're striving for? If you're getting into political arguments, why? Like, why are you trying to change this person's opinion? And I'm not saying, completely shut down and go after fascists like 100%, but like but even in those conversations, like, what is your goal? Do you really think that you're going to change this person's opinion online? And what are your goals beyond that? Why do you disagree with this person? Like, yes, fascism is bad. Most of us understand. About to say we all understand that, but apparently that's 2026, and that is not true. But how do we manage that, and how do we work with that and turn it into something that we can move towards? What do we see working where things aren't working? What do think of the very mercurial energy that brought in this reading with the Knight of Swords and air and Gemini, and really disseminate the information, and think about it from the more Virgo elements of Mercury, and what are we trying to fix, and why are we trying to fix it? And I think we can ground ourselves in sort of that sort of thing, as we move through these tough conversations that we might have within our personal lives, as we move into, as we move through this week with the things and events, fires, more, bombing, more an exaggeration of supply chain and economy, disruption. What do we want? What brings us joy, and how do we get there? And let's focus on that. Accept the reality we live in, but let's focus on, where we want to go, and how we find joy. And the second decan of Leo is very Jupiterian. It kind of makes me think of for my Last Airbender fans, the relationship between Uncle Iroh and Zuko. Like, this is, Jupiterian energy is very wise and philosophical in that Uncle Iroh type of way, asking, who is trying to be this guide for Zuko to expand and grow, and really think about like why he wants what he wants. Why is he so bent on restoring his honor with an abusive father figure? Right, Uncle Iroh is really trying to get Zuko to see that. And also, though, like, really consider the Zuko energy, of being a young king, being the Regulus. How do you channel him too? Because once he accepted, that he had agency and he could decide, what his fate was that wasn't predetermined, and really found his convictions. It's how he was able to get Aang to the place where Aang needed to be. So really think of that sort of energy in here, with that. All right, and let's go ahead and let's look at clarifier for the week. This is from the Phantom Tarot deck. So let's just see what we get. Oh, well, I'm always scared when they come flying out like that, because who knows. So we have the Ace of Wands reversed. The Ace of Wands is that initiating spark. It is the 0 degrees Aries energy that so many planets have come across, and we have Mercury about to do it, and then the moon will do it. We have that whole lineup going later into this week and this month of so much energy in Aries. It really makes me think of, Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. And this is, aces they're an initiation, they're an offering. Fire, Mars energy is, let's reforge through fire. Sometimes we need destruction to build new, because the old just doesn't serve us anymore. Burn down the facades. That's very, Saturn, Neptune, Mars. Just even Saturn, Neptune in Aries together, because they're ruled by Mars, being in there. So there's always going to be this kind of like very Martian way that Saturn and Neptune are working together. Not so much as they've gone out of the tight conjunction from a couple months ago. But I think every time something hits that 0 degrees, like, yeah, those Saturn and Neptune aren't still there, but it's still kind of like that, like it's something else going through that same portal that was just opened. It was initiated by the Saturn Neptune, as they kind of led the way into this Aries energy that we're having, this Martian ruled energy that we are having. And Saturn is about boundaries and lessons, and that's very much that 7 of Wand. So I think, and reversed, this is, have we on a personal level really accepted that things have changed? Have we really accepted that there's no going back? Not in any capacity. Not in the way that some people want to go back to the 1950s. Not in the way that some people think that, like, pre-COVID is something we should go back to. Not even just pre this most recent election we can go back to. We're not going back to any of that. We're not. That's not, and that's not, sure, yeah, transparency, I have a bias on that because of my beliefs. And, I think anyone listening to this understands that the world axis point of 0 degrees Aries and Saturn and Neptune crossing that, and that initiation that this Ace of Wands is referring to, like, it's been done. The spark was there. Like, the facades were lit on fire. Stuff is burning. We can, be that meme and just sit in the fire and pretend that stuff isn't burning, or we can understand that it is, live in that reality, and figure out what we want to do to make things better. And that is very much the energy of this week. And to just sum it up, don't be impulsive and rush into things. We're never complete on our journey, and don't lose sight of that. The page of Night's energy. Don't lose sight of even, think of 0 degrees, zero, and tarot, the Fool. Like, we're all kind of on that Fool's journey at different points in it, and just because you know a lot about something, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and you don't know everything, and not one single person can know everything. Be very intentional with boundaries. Stand firm in your beliefs. Expansion and ambition equals success. So what was Saturn's initiation? What structures, what ideas needed to burn inside of you to accept the expansion and ambition that can lead to your personal success, your goals in life, that the Six of Wands is talking about? And just to summarize from the more personal level, there is going to be a lot of impulsive energy. There's going to be clumsiness. There is going to be miscommunication. Roll with it. Don't fly off the handle. And again, know when to stand your ground, but also know when to have patience, because that is what makes a good leader. Is and that is where you can ground yourself in ambition, in finding your success, in navigating this week. Yeah, and I think that sums it up. And stay safe. Find joy this week. Don't linger in the bad news. Let it exist, accept it, and then keep going. Keep forging ahead and expanding and finding joy, because if we can do that on a singular level, it'll be so much easier to see that on a collective level and move into something truly positive once these fires subside, and they will. It'll feel like forever sometimes. I get it. But they will subside. They will not burn forever. All right. I love you all, and I will see you next Monday for the next week ahead. All right. Bye.